All right, today we're making blackberry jam. I went out with my kids and my wife yesterday and we picked 5 gallons of blackberries over at my parents' house. And so I'm today gonna go ahead and show you how I make jam, and then I'm gonna make some jelly and I'll show you all that stuff too. Maybe we'll end up with some good blackberry syrup as well. But first things first, I wanted to do a little bit of testing here and see exactly how much yielded fruit I get from a gallon of blackberries after I've crushed it and strained out the seeds and stuff, which is the first thing we're gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and run that test right now. I'm gonna see what a gallon actually yields for me. So what I'm doing today is I'm using this for the jam. This is a Victoria strainer. I'm using this straining cone here. This is literally like made for berries. And this here is the Victoria strainer. It's pretty much a classic for processing fruit, but also all sorts of other stuff. We use it for applesauce a lot, but you can use it for salsa and all sorts of other things. It's a pretty cool strainer. So we're gonna see this thing in action here. But essentially what I'm gonna be doing is getting all the, first of all, kind of the core of the blackberries. With raspberries, they kind of pull off of the harder core on the inside. With blackberries, they often don't. But also we're gonna get out the seeds because blackberry seeds are kind of huge and my wife hates them in the jam. So we're gonna go ahead and get those out too. The, I guess, kind of trash, the leftovers, that's what's gonna come out there. And we'll just use this bucket to catch it. Before that, I'm gonna wash them. So I'm gonna use just a regular old colander. I'm also gonna I use this liquid measuring cup to measure out the amount of fruit when it's time to actually make the jam for the recipe. And then I have all this other stuff. Obviously I have jars. I have this saucepan, that's what I'm gonna use to actually mix and make the jam, cook it and everything like that. Some measuring cups. This funnel I'm gonna use to fill the jars, just makes it a lot easier. This obviously to grab hot jars. I'm gonna grab them hot out of the oven, fill them, and then obviously I'm going to put them into hot water to water bath them and pull them out as well. This little magnet here is pretty handy. I'm gonna use it to grab hot lids out of boiling water. This allows me to measure the head space. So basically, depending on the recipe and the canning method and stuff you're gonna use, you're gonna wanna leave a certain amount of space at the top of the jar. And each one of these little teeth or stairs is 1/4 inch. So depending on the headspace we want, this helps us measure it. It's always nice to have a couple spatulas on hand. And then this is a nice scoop. Actually, this is coming really handy. And it's got this little hook, so it can kind of sit right on the edge. That's the stuff I have over here. I got a bunch of pint jars. I like to do jams and jellies in pints, but we also have some of those smaller jars. These are a cup or an 8 ounce. I also have these on a baking tray because once the jars are nice and rinsed, then I'll put them in the oven at 220 degrees. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. I am gonna rinse off a couple of those smaller ones and add them to it as well. But for now, let's get the oven started. I'm going to set it to 220 degrees. 212 is the boiling point. And so 220 is gonna essentially kill anything that could be on these things. So we're getting a nice, clean, sanitized jars. Other stuff we're gonna need, I have this little pot here full of water. I'm gonna go ahead and get that turned on to start boiling. I want that to boil and then I'll turn it down to low to simmer. Then I'm gonna take these lids, I'm gonna go ahead and just drop them in. That does a couple of things. It gets them nice and hot and sanitary, but also it softens, I got a couple more here. It softens the little sealing ring. So when I set it on the jar, but right before canning, it kind of sticks and seals a little bit better. So I like to stick these in the water, get them warming up right now. I've got my rings. I've got just an extra bucket. You're gonna want some sort of a bucket or a bowl to mix your sugar in. The recipe that I'm using today calls to mix the sugar and the pectin, or a little bit of the sugar with the pectin beforehand, but also to measure out the sugar and have it all ready. It's best when you're making jam to actually mix in all the sugar at one time. I also have a big stock pot for canning, so we're gonna go ahead and go through that process today. And of course, I'm gonna need some pectin. So I'm using this is Sure Gel. We use the low sugar option. not because it's necessarily like super healthy. It's actually because it's plenty sweet. When we use like the full sugar recipe, we find that it's just way too sweet, the jams and stuff that we end up with. So we basically almost always use the low sugar. So that's what we're using today. Basically, too, what it does is it allows me to get a good jam or even a jelly by using less sugar. You need a certain amount of sugar to react with the pectin to actually get it to gel up. And so that's part of what's going on here too. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and rinse off a couple more jars. This is just getting off any dust from them sitting. I've learned my lesson. I like to store the jars when they're empty. I like to store them upside down so they don't fill up with dust. But I haven't always done that, so, and even then I would go ahead and rinse them out, but they can get pretty dusty, and to the point that I end up having to fully wash them. And we'll just put those in the oven real quick. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and fill up my stock pot. It's gonna take a while for this to boil. So let's go ahead and get that going. Now I want it high enough to be able to cover the jars. Remember that when we put jars in, it's actually going to raise the level of the water a little bit, but still, if when I start, it's already at least as tall as a jar, I know I'm gonna cover them pretty well. So I'm usually gonna go that high or even a little bit higher. So I'm gonna grab one of these jars. These are the tallest ones I have. And I'm just gonna use that almost as a gauge to make sure that it's high enough. All right, that's plenty covered. We'll do that out. I'll go ahead and get this on the stove and we'll cover it. Okay, now making the jam is actually pretty easy. So the first thing I want to do is kind of want to rinse these off a little bit. When we pick these, sometimes you get like little bugs on them. It's just really nice to give them a good quick rinse. Plus then I can pick out any little leaves and stuff and try to get rid of as much just other dirt and stuff that may have gotten on these. We don't spray these like with pesticides and stuff, so there's not a whole lot of other stuff I'm really worried about. Also, when it comes to like leaves and little sticks and stuff, that's gonna get strained out. And I don't wanna rinse this too much because I don't want to lose a ton of good juice. So I'm gonna go with that. That seems actually pretty good. All right, next we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put some of this, as much as we can, into the strainer here in the top. All right, it's a good start. Set that aside. Now, we're gonna do a little bit of mashing and cranking. So we're gonna crank the handle over here on the side. I told you there's some bugs. All right, we're gonna get rid of that guy. But we're gonna crank this handle over here on the side and while we mash it down. But first I'm gonna go ahead and, this is mostly water, so I'm gonna go ahead and dry that out of there and we'll get started. Hey guys. Good. I think I should probably have some paper towel down there on the floor.
You have an apron?
It's just blackberries. Plus then, if I had an apron, they wouldn't see the plaid.
Are you getting much of the fruit through that thing? It looks mostly juice.
Well, if you come see what's coming out as I crank though, it's the stuff as I crank that you start to get more of the fruit. If you stand back there for very long, you will. I am filming it right now.
How is Daddy filming? You guys stay back and
With these cameras that are rolling. All right, now we'll add the rest of that gallon. All right, so that's the extra pulpy stuff. Some people might want some of that in their jam, but with blackberries especially, I want to keep as much of this out as I can. But what I can do with this is I'm going to go ahead and throw it in my compost. Maybe feed some of it to the chickens. We'll see. But probably just compost it. Then I'm going to go ahead and take this off. This is not a messy process. Okay, so I'm going to take one of these spatulas. Go ahead, kind of clean this off. Okay, and try to get as much of this fruit as I can. This is the stuff that made it through that just didn't drip in. So I want to keep that. All right, so let's see how much fruit this ended up being. I guess first let me go ahead. I'm going to take this off. Probably need to loosen the screw a little more. There's 4 cups. Yep. So now I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more based upon the amount that I just got from 1 gallon. I'm going to need about 6.85 more cups of raw fruit. So we'll shoot for just under 7, and we should end up with almost exactly the right amount of fruit to be able to make a double batch. Okay. We want to be pretty precise on the amount of fruit as well as on our sugar and everything. I mean, really that's about all it is, right? It's fruit and sugar and pectin. We need the ratio of fruit to sugar to be pretty dang accurate. Otherwise, there's a good chance it's not going to set up very well and your jam could end up too thick or too sloopy. So we want to make sure we get just the right amount. So now I have 10 cups of fruit in there. Now, what that is it's a double batch. So I'm going to end up with needing 2 of these packages and using double the amount of sugar that it says in the package, which works out just fine. That should end up yielding about 14 cups of jam, which would be 7 of these pints. So we'll see where that gets. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less. Even though we're pretty accurate on our measurements, it just sometimes works out that way. So we're gonna give that a shot next. So what we're gonna do now is set aside the sugar that we're gonna need for this recipe. So now get out a mixing bowl or something and your sugar. So I'm going to need 8 cups. Just level them off pretty well. So now I'm going to take a half a cup from what I just put in this bowl, put it into a smaller bowl, and then I'm going to mix in the 2 packets of Sure Gel. Just mix them together. It's pretty good. And we're going to take this and we're going to actually put it over in the fruit mixture, and then we're going to start heating. So let's move over there. There we go. So now we'll add this mixture in here to the fruit and stir it in. But we also need to get the heat started. So we're going to go ahead and bring it to a boil, a full rolling boil on high heat. But we need to stir basically constantly until that happens. I also want to stir that in really well because I don't want clumps. We want that pectin and that sugar to mix in really well. Check on this. Yeah, that's boiling pretty well. I'll go ahead and turn it down just a little bit. Turn the water in the back up a little bit more because it's no longer boiling. You can tell it's getting close. Obviously it is boiling a little bit, but we want a full rolling boil. So even while I'm stirring, it should be just boiling hard. If I stop for a sec, you can see there's a little bit of foam on top. And it is boiling there. But here, if we just keep going for just another minute or two, it's gonna be at a nice full rolling boil. See, I'm seeing those bubbles boiling constantly now, even though I'm stirring. So that's where we want to be. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my sugar. We want to do this all at once. Stir that in. As it stirs in, it may stop boiling just because we just added a bunch of material that's not this hot, but it seems to still be boiling pretty well. Once it's fully dissolved, we'll see if it's still boiling. Still feeling some clumps of sugar. It's getting there. Yeah, it feels pretty well dissolved now. So now we need to get it back to a boil. So I didn't turn down the heat at all for any of that. All right, there we go. I'm gonna call that a rolling boil. Even as I'm stirring, the bubbles are still going. So we need to set a timer for 1 minute. Set a timer for 1 minute. As soon as that goes off, we need to pull this immediately from the heat, and we're gonna start putting it into jars. Right. I'm gonna bring that over here. Now we're ready to go ahead and start putting this into jars. This is where I'm using this. I'm gonna grab one out of the oven. It's nicely sanitized. I set it usually here like on a little towel. That jam's so good. And then I'll scoop that. Just remember, everything here is hot. Give it a little stir. I just know I'm gonna be washing these towels. Oh, see? I almost forgot, look at that, I'm already making a mess. But if I use the funnel, this works really well. I'm gonna double check my headspace. And we wanna fill to within 1/4 inch of the top. That's only one of these little steps. So we're gonna get it basically to the top there. And then when I pull the funnel out, I can check it, and I'm right about there, okay? Next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use a damp rag. I'm just gonna wipe the rim. It's gonna help with the sealing. Then I can use my magnet, and I'm gonna grab a lid out of my little boiling pot of water in the back. Set a lid on, just like that. Bring some rings over. Okay. Then I'm gonna put a ring on. Now this is really important. I only tighten it like finger tight. I don't even crank it at all with my hand. If you over tighten this before bottling, before actually the canning process, the water bath, you'll probably explode your jars. They're just gonna crack open. You're gonna lose everything you just spent all this time doing. Okay, I'm gonna grab another towel real quick, and we're gonna set these on the towel. I don't know my kitchen. There we go. All right, cool. Well, I'll set these completed jars there. There's plenty warm, but I have apparently what they call asbestos hands, where I touch hot things and it doesn't bother me that much. All right, next. Funnel and jam. I love this huge scoop. It's so good for this. We've had it for like, I don't know, 7, 8 years, maybe. Long time, and it's just awesome. Once I've seen what the headspace looks like, it says within 1/4 inch, so basically 1/4 inch or less. I don't check it every single time. I'm not that worried about it. Also, most of the time I can look at the rim and see I didn't really get anything on there, but I'm just gonna double check and just do a quick little wipe down of it real quick. All right, another lid. This whole process of canning, I often like to do outdoors. That way I don't get my kitchen all super hot. It's August right now. It's really nice to do outdoors. I use a Camp Chef stove. I'll show you that setup one of these times. And this is just really nice because I can just bring the jam out, set it down, have a fold out table, just kind of line everything up, have my lids boiling, have my canning stuff ready, and it's all outside, and we can contain a lot of this mess outdoors. But for today and for the purpose of filming for you, it was just a lot easier to do it in here in the kitchen. All right, another jar. To sanitize your jars, you can also boil them. Then they're just filled with water too. I like the oven method. They're dry, but both work. The other nice thing is because the jars are hot and the jam is hot, when I put them in the water bath to can, it'll be hot. If the jars were a lot cooler, then I could run into problems where they would just crack. I've had that happen before too. So it's really nice to be using hot jars. With some things, I know there's some debate about it, but sometimes you can get away with not even canning with some things, juices and stuff, and some jams. But basically I put this on. In fact, some of these lids might pop for me without me even putting them in the water bath, but I'm still gonna do it just to be safe. Okay, next. Four down. According to the recipe, we should get 3 more. Well, I've done my 7 jars, but I've got a little more. I'm gonna try 1 small jar. Right there. That right there was basically perfect. Now we have 8 jars. These should all fit just fine because this is a nice wide stock pot. So I'm gonna make sure this is back to a rolling boil. It's just about there. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these in. Once they're all in and it's boiling, then it's just a 10-minute water bath and we're done. Okay, here we go. All right, 10 minutes has passed. I'm gonna go ahead and take the lid off here. It's boiling really solidly now. Still. All right, now I can go ahead and lift this out carefully. Best to keep it pretty level. Honestly, my water level was a little high. Go ahead and take this one out first. Okay, now all the jars are out, and I'm just gonna let them sit for a little while. They'll dry off a little bit of water that's on them, but also they should all pop. If the lids don't pop down, after probably, I don't know, the next half hour at the latest, one of them's already done, then it means that that one didn't seal properly. Put it in the refrigerator and use it sooner. So we'll come back in just a few minutes. All right, so I did let these cool for a while and get totally dried off. At this point, I can, I actually like to keep the rings on and tighten them down just a little bit, but you actually can get away with taking the rings off if you want to or need to use them for something else. But I let them cool for a bit and get totally dried off. But actually, all of these popped within about 3 minutes, which was pretty cool. That small of a head space at the very top will often cause that to happen. So now all that's left to do is to label these so that we know, 1, what they are. This looks a lot like a lot of other things that I make, but 2, so that we know when we made it. They always say like use it within a year or so. Honestly, I have jam that's 3-4 years old that is still just awesome. Tastes great, doesn't smell weird when I open it up. So I'm not that worried about it. But I still like to make sure I'm using the oldest stuff first. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna set these here and go ahead and put some labels on it. Now, I did make these labels. They're pretty cool. I use these. These are just Avery labels. You can buy them at the grocery store. I also have a link on pantrypreparedness.com/labels, where one, you can find the exact labels that you need, but also where you can download some free templates I've put together. So go check those out if you want pretty looking labels. I put some templates together because one, I like them to look nice, but two, I just tried to take the template that they have and just make it a little bit more user friendly for me. So these say what they are. They're blackberry jam. I've also just put the month and the year. So then I just take one of these, stick it on, and they fit perfectly. These are the 2-inch labels. They just fit so nicely. Two down. So we'll get all those done, and then we will have plenty of delicious blackberry jam properly labeled that we can set aside and use as soon as we're ready for it. I hope you found that helpful. I also am going to be making next some blackberry jelly because I have a ton more of these blackberries. So make sure you go check out that video here on Pantry Preparedness. And as always, if you have any questions or anything, make sure you comment below with those questions. I would love to be able to help you with whatever questions or concerns you have related to preparedness. That's what I'm here for. So until then, we'll see you next time.